Hello, everyone. Welcome to Break a Leg Briefings, conversations with people from the theater world and beyond. I'm your host, Teri Black, and today is our debut presentation of Break a Leg Briefings. And we're so honored and thrilled to have with us our first guest, award-winning playwright Lauren Gunderson, who also happens to be the most produced American playwright in 2017 and again in 2019. So hi, Lauren, thanks for coming by. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for doing this and for having me be here. It's such a pleasure to see you again.
Oh, it's great to see you again. You know what? Let's start with your background, which happens to be the name of one of your early plays. In fact, we did a stage reading of background, and you wrote background, and we did background when you were still a student at Emory University in Atlanta. So
Right.
why don't you start with sharing with us your journey from your student days at Emory until where you are today? How did you get here?
Yes, well, I'm so grateful for Break a Leg. You have been such an early adopter and an early supporter of my science plays. So it's been quite a journey for both of us. But yeah, so when I was I knew I wanted to write for a long time, even in elementary school and middle school. But the question comes, what are you going to write about? So I wrote my first kind of Southern lady plays. I'm from the South, I'm from Georgia. And then, quickly followed, well, what are the other great stories of our time? And it didn't take me long to find stories of science. I was always an avid lover of science and reader of science. And, looking at young Isaac Newton and the story behind the play background, kind of unknown, unheralded cosmologist, Ralph Alpher. But there's so many stories. And that was even before I got to the stories of women in science, which are even more dramatic because things are way harder for them.
And we're going to get to that. So also, what advice, if any, do you have to give to aspiring playwrights?
Yeah, a lot of it is getting to know the theater that exists, and not just to see what has been done, but to see what you like. And then if you're an Angels in America person, if you're a Tennessee Williams person, if you're a Paula Vogel person, then borrow and blend and use your voice with their techniques and the things they've inspired in you. So the advice is really read as many plays as you can, see as many plays as you can. And one of the strange benefits of this moment in COVID times is we have access to streaming to so much theater across the world. So you can really educate yourself now. And then, what I did was just start writing. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to write a lot of crap. You're going to write a lot of things that you will keep for a long time and make better later. And you're going to figure out who you are as a writer, what you care about, what you believe theater is for, and how you want to do it.
Well, what's so great about your plays is, first of all, your plays are feminist in nature. Your plays have a lot of strong female characters, including some well-known scientists such as Madame Curie and other scientists as well. And what's so interesting about your plays is you write a lot about science and or scientists. What propels you to write about science?
It's eminently dramatic. My husband is a scientist, and I've peppered him with these kinds of questions. But I started writing science a long time ago, and part of it was because I'm looking for something that you can put on stage that is in the human form, that you can explore levels of emotion and have moments of surprise and tension. And science fits that bill perfectly. These eureka moments when a scientist goes from not knowing if something is true or can be proved to proving it is a magical human-shaped emotional bomb that can go off on stage. And it's great for actors, it's great for directors and designers, and audiences I find really like to learn. That's part of why they're there. So having that all happen on stage is a natural fit.
The words like to learn. I think that's part of your magic in that it's not like going to a lecture. When you go to a play, your plays in particular, and your plays are about science, we're entertained, we're enthralled, and we're educated at the same time. We don't know in a way that we're learning anything, in a sense. And that, I think, is, I don't want to call it a trick because it's much more complicated than that. But that's one of your fantastic assets, where we learn about all these human people, the movie Hidden Figures. If you take Hidden Figures and put it alongside Silent Sky, which is another one, of her fabulous plays about these women in the early 20th century that worked at the astronomy laboratory, observatory at Harvard, who we never heard about, who we never knew anything about, that they accomplished all these great things. So we're also learning about them as humans, we're learning about them as scientists, and we're learning them from a historical point of view. But was there anything in particular when you began your career, or even now where you are now, that propelled you or influenced you to write about science?
Yeah. Well, science is a way to talk about everything. It's a way to talk about philosophy and ethics and everything, of course, scientific, but what that means to be human, what it means to participate in the great journey of civilization and the great knowledge building that we all do together. And it's also one of those things that science, the business of science seems to care if you're male, female, trans, non-binary, where you come from, but science itself doesn't. Science itself wants you to, so to speak, it is open for all discoveries, no matter who you are, where you come from. So I love those stories because it is in that space of science and math that you can simply prove yourself by proving yourself. And so in that way, it's a great way, a gateway to talk about feminism, to talk about intersectional feminism, to talk about biases we have as our silly human selves. And science says, I don't care who made the discovery, I'm glad it's discovered. So in that way, it levels the playing field. And it also allows me to explore a lot of other political things and emotional realms too.
Well, I would also say, when you're thinking about it, reminded me of one of the first successful, and I don't know what year it was produced, you may know this better than I do, the play Proof, about this woman that was a mathematician.
Mm-hmm.
To my mind, and from my memory, that was one of the first successful commercial Broadway plays that was about science and had a woman in there that was this wonderful mathematician. Now, what year was that? Do you have any idea when that was done? I'm trying to recall.
Early 90s, like
Okay, right.
yeah,
So that was big, and was written, I think it was written by a man.
yeah, it was David Auburn, I think.
That's right. So you came along after that, and all these fantastic characters and true people, and you really educate us for putting the history together, the science together, and the humanity together. And also what I think you've done, and you've had great influence in changing the image of scientists, because for years the image of a scientist was always a man. He was always an old man. He was always an old white man. He had a white coat on, show that he was a scientist, of course. He had this crazy hair, and his mission in life was to destroy the world. And so that was one of our symbols of science. And the other symbol was, well, if you like science, you're kind of a nerd. Or the other thing was, it's too intimidating. I mean, when I would, and I'm married to a scientist as well, just tell you very briefly, that I would go to a party sometimes and people would ask me, and they used to do this more with my generation, what does your husband do? And if I would say physicist, no matter the age of the person, no matter the ethnicity, the generation, whatever, they would invariably say, oh my God, he must be so smart. I mean, I could never take physics, not legal. So it had also, for the public at large, even the people that were more educated than the ordinary people, a very intimidating influence. So now that we're speaking of science, which brings my next question, and you mentioned it earlier, as far as the pandemic is concerned, and we're all suffering through that, many in different ways, how has that affected your creativity?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's come in phases. I think early on, I was in shock like everybody and kind of adjusting to a radical new normal. I live in San Francisco. We were I think the first major city to go on lockdown about a week or two before everybody else, and I'm grateful for that. But it changed everything, and it changed how I related to theater. Theater is such a physical, communal event with lots of breathing and singing and all the things we're not supposed to do. So that took a big shock. It was a kind of existential moment to sit back and think about this thing that I love and that I do, and why, and what does it mean. And but after that, about a few weeks of that, I kind of sprang into action, and it's been a couple of different things. The creativity has been around giving classes for free online. So getting people to just tune in for an hour. I did it for a while there once a week, and we would just meet and talk, sometimes with other professionals, sometimes just me rambling about dramatic structure and, rising action and character development. But it was really interesting, and it brought a lot of people together, and people that I wouldn't have known before. So I'm grateful for that. And then personally, my husband is a virologist who specializes in pandemics. So it's been an interesting fella to have at this time. And, a colleague of mine at the theater in which I'm resident out here, suggested, like, would this be a time to have should you write about Nathan? Is there a way to do it? And I thought, oh my God, no, I basically kind of made a rule in my mind. Like, I was just never going to write about Nathan. It's just too complicated. But then the more I thought about it, the idea never left. So we actually just started rehearsals for that play, which is called The Catastrophist. It is.
Wait a minute. It's called The Catastrophist.
The Catastrophist.
Okay, so that has something to do with catastrophe?
Catastrophes, yes. It is a person who specializes in catastrophes. It is a bit of a made-up moniker, but it's a bit of kind of a joke that Nathan once called himself. I'm kind of a catastrophist. I just specialize in preventing and predicting and being resilient, creating a world resilient to catastrophes, specifically pandemics for him. But so the play is called The Catastrophist. It's a one-person show. We're filming it on a stage, so it is a film in the theater. And we just started rehearsals. So we are doing that. That's all been written in lockdown. Nathan has watched one read through of it, and I hadn't let him watch it until, we were well into rehearsal to give him a chance, and he liked it.
In other words, Nathan is the husband. Nathan is the catastrophist then.
Indeed, he is a catastrophist.
Okay.
So he is performing. Another actor is performing him, but it's a very personal story. It's about his work in pandemics. It's not set now. It's set a few years ago. So it's not COVID, but it's definitely about the person who looks out for pandemics, watches them, tracks them, understands them inside on a macro scale and a micro scale, very literally a micro scale, and about some of his discoveries, but a lot about his personal life and losses and all the things that make a person. So I'm kind of shocked that this play exists now, but you'll be able to see it streamed worldwide in January.
Oh, that's great. So it's a one-person show. Now, why don't you give us the information? Where can we see it? When can we see it? And how can we see it?
Sure. You can find all the information on marintheater.org. Company is the theater company that is co-producing with Roundhouse Theater in Washington, D.C. So there are two theaters each on a different coast that are collaborating to distribute. It'll be available for like 20 weeks or some great amount of time. So you'll be able to see it. You'll just buy a ticket, stream it, and it'll be easy to watch on any screen of any size that you have.
And now the play, okay, so because of the title, I have to ask you this, The Catastrophist. It sounds a little scary. Is there, without giving away the end of the play, is there some note of optimism in it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Nathan is a scientist whose job is to help us predict, prevent, and be resilient to pandemics. And his work is actually greatly detailed in a recent cover of Wired magazine that's from August of this year, where they basically say, we should have listened to Nathan because Nathan had a plan for a kind of pandemic insurance. He and his colleagues worked together. He has brilliant colleagues around the world. So this idea of if we'd had insurance or insurance systems to prevent against pandemics, using all of their data models and stuff, we would have been certainly better off than we are now. So it's an interesting story, but it is definitely about how science helps us understand the world and ourselves and our place in this world and how we can help.
We've taken something that's bad, not to sound Pollyannish, but we've taken something that's bad and made it into something good.
Yeah.
And Lauren, that's great. I want to thank you so much today for coming, for being our debut guest.
Thank you.
And we wish you well. Happy holidays. And of course, break a leg.
Yes, indeed. You too. Thanks, everybody.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Please join us again for Break a Leg Briefings. I'm Teri Black. Stay safe.